I never thought I'd be the guy writing a post like this, but here I am. My name's Mark, and I'm in my mid-30s, living what I thought was the American dream with my wife, Sarah. We've been married for nearly a decade, and for the most part, things were going well. We had a nice house, decent jobs, and a couple of kids. But lately, I noticed some things that just didn't sit right with me. It started off as little changes. Sarah, who had always been the kind of person who enjoyed coming home and spending time with the family, began to act differently. She was more distant, often glued to her phone, and would sometimes take a little too long to respond when I'd ask her about her day. At first, I brushed it off as stress from work. After all, she had been managing a demanding project. But as time went on, the signs became harder to ignore. One night, I was putting the kids to bed when I heard Sarah in the other room. She was on the phone, and I could hear her giggling at something. It was a sound I hadn't heard in a long time. I felt a twinge of jealousy, but I told myself it was just a friend. I mean, who wouldn't want to let loose after a long week? Yet something in my gut said otherwise. Then came the house cleaner, let's call her Jenna. Sarah had insisted on hearing someone to help out around the house since we both worked full-time. Jenna was young, attractive, and a bit too friendly with Sarah for my liking. I brushed it off, telling myself that Sarah was simply trying to be nice. But as the weeks went by, I couldn't help but notice they seemed to share a bond that felt a bit too close for comfort. I would walk in after work to find them laughing together, and it stung. One day, while cleaning out my closet, I stumbled across a couple of Sarah's things that seemed out of place: an expensive piece of jewelry that she didn't remember buying, and a receipt from a restaurant where she claimed she went out with the girls. The date on the receipt was the same day Jenna had come over for cleaning. The pieces began to fit together in a way that made my heart race, but I kept telling myself I was overthinking things. I tried to shake off the feeling, but then I noticed Sarah would go out for errands and come back hours later. My mind was racing with possibilities. I wanted to believe the best, but my instincts were screaming at me. I decided to do some investigating. I set up my phone to record during one of her errands. I never expected what I captured that day. When I finally sat down to watch the footage, I was struck with disbelief. There it was, Sarah and Jenna, laughing in a car, sharing an intimate moment that shattered my heart into a million pieces. The realization hit me like a freight train. I was crushed, angry, and felt completely betrayed. The woman I loved more than anything had been having an affair with our house cleaner. My mind was racing. I had so many thoughts, but one thing was clear: I needed to confront her. That confrontation came just a few days later. I told Sarah we needed to talk, my heart pounding in my chest. When I finally faced her, I could see the flicker of fear in her eyes. I laid it all out: the evidence, the lies, and the betrayal. Her initial reaction was shock, and for a moment I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd misread the situation. But as I watched her eyes dart around, trying to find an escape route, I knew the truth. She tried to deny it at first, throwing out excuses about how I was imagining things and that Jenna was just a friend who was going through a tough time. But I wouldn't let her dodge the truth. The anger boiled inside me as she concocted one flimsy excuse after another. Each lie stung even more than the last, and I felt my world spinning out of control. I had never felt so lost and bewildered. I wanted to scream, to cry, but I stood there, stone-faced, as she tried to spin her web of lies around me. I felt like I was watching a tragic play unfold, and I was the unsuspecting audience member who didn't see the twist coming. What was supposed to be a conversation about our future turned into an episode of betrayal and deceit. I felt like a fool, and the pain was unbearable. I pushed her to tell the truth, but it was like pulling teeth. The weight of those lies settled in my chest, suffocating me. How could she do this to me, to us? As I collected my thoughts, I wondered how I'd move forward from this. The love I once had for her felt tainted, and anger surged through me like a tidal wave. I realized I had a choice to make: either wallow in my pain or take action. My heart was heavy, but I needed to be strong for myself and for the kids. I couldn't let this betrayal define me. As I walked away from our confrontation, a plan began to form in my mind. I wasn't going to let her get away with this unscathed. I would ensure she felt the weight of her choices. I'd expose her for who she really was, and in doing so, I would reclaim my own dignity. The thought of revenge felt intoxicating, and I knew that I had to see this through. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a long and painful journey of discovery and healing. If she wanted to play with fire, I was more than ready to turn up the heat. The aftermath of my confrontation with Sarah left me in a whirlwind of emotions. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and a burning desire for revenge. I knew I couldn't just sit back and let this slide. I needed to take control of the situation, and for that, I needed a plan, something that would expose her for who she really was and make her understand the gravity of her actions. I spent the next few days in a haze, going through the motions of my life while my mind raced with ideas. I started by gathering evidence. I remembered the footage I had recorded of Sarah and Jenna together, and I replayed it over and over, each time feeling more fueled by the raw betrayal. I also decided to reach out to a few of Sarah's close friends to see if they had any inkling about her infidelity. I wanted to ensure I had a solid case before I executed my plan. I called up Michelle, one of Sarah's best friends. I had always felt she was a bit too forgiving toward Sarah's behavior, but I needed her to help me understand the depths of Sarah's deception. I casually invited her over for coffee under the pretense of catching up. During our conversation, I kept a straight face while my insides churned. I could see Michelle's eyes widen when I mentioned Sarah's new friend Jenna. "You mean the house cleaner?" she asked, surprise etched on her face. I thought they were just friends, but there were rumors going around. Rumors. My heart sank further. I pressed her for details, and she told me something that confirmed my worst fears. Sarah had been acting differently not just around me, but around everyone. She had been distant, secretive, and I wasn't the only one who noticed. My anger simmered as I realized how many people Sarah had fooled, but it also gave me fuel for my fire. I would make sure everyone knew the truth. Over the next week, I quietly gathered more information, talking to Sarah's friends and even some of my own. I made it my mission to piece together the timeline of her affair. I never let on that I knew about her infidelity. Instead, I played the part of the clueless husband while I worked behind the scenes. When I finally felt ready to execute my plan, I decided to confront Sarah one last time. I wanted her to confess to me before I exposed her. I thought it might give her a chance to come clean, to understand the pain she had caused and admit her wrongdoing. I invited her out to dinner, a place we used to frequent before everything had gone south. I wanted it to be a setting that would remind her of the love we once shared, perhaps coaxing out some honesty. As we sat across from each other, I noticed how nervous she seemed. She kept fidgeting with her necklace, avoiding eye contact. I had to give her some credit, she must have been feeling the pressure. I started off with small talk, reminiscing about good times, but then I steered the conversation toward the future. "Sarah, do you think we can get through this?" I asked, keeping my tone even. "Do you think we can rebuild what we had?" She hesitated, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. Finally, she responded, "I don't know, Mark, things are just different now." That was my cue. I leaned forward, ready to strike. "Different? You mean like how you've been spending time with Jenna?" Her expression changed instantly. The color drained from her face, and for a moment I thought she might actually confess. But then the wall came up. "What are you talking about?" She shot back defensively. "You're just being paranoid." I couldn't believe her audacity. "Paranoid? I have proof, Sarah. I've seen you with her. I know the truth." I pulled out my phone and played the footage, her laughter, the intimacy, everything. In that moment, I saw her world shatter. She scrambled to defend herself, stumbling over her words. "It's not what it looks like. We were just being friendly. You always make me feel like I have to hide things from you." I felt my anger boiling over. "Friendly? You were sharing secrets with my house cleaner while I was at work. You betrayed me, and you think calling it friendly will change that?" As she continued to deny everything, I took a deep breath, steadying my resolve. This was it. I wasn't going to allow her to manipulate me anymore. "Sarah, I'm not interested in your lies. I'm done playing nice. You've made your choice, and I'm going to make mine. The world deserves to know who you really are." The look on her face was a mix of disbelief and fear, and in that moment I felt powerful. I had taken back control, and I was ready to see my plan through. I didn't know exactly how I'd expose her, but I was determined. I'd gather those friends of hers, maybe even family, and let them know the truth about the woman they thought they knew. Sarah had to face the consequences of her actions. That night, I walked away from the restaurant with a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. I was heartbroken, yes, but I was also emboldened. I had learned that my love for Sarah had blinded me to the reality of our marriage. This was going to be my journey of reclaiming my life and my dignity. The next day, I started drafting a message to Sarah's friends, ready to share the truth without a hint of remorse. I knew there would be fallout, but I was prepared to face it. My heart was heavy, but my resolve was strong. I wasn't just exposing Sarah to others. I was shedding light on the truth for myself. I was taking back my narrative, and I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. The following week was a whirlwind of emotions. I spent most of my time preparing for the inevitable fallout from my decision to expose Sarah. I had reached out to a few of her closest friends, carefully crafting messages that would disclose her affair without coming across as vindictive. I wanted them to see the truth, to understand the betrayal that had taken place right under their noses. I felt a sense of purpose with each name I typed, but deep down, I also feared the potential consequences of my actions. On a Thursday evening, I gathered a small group of Sarah's friends at a local bar. I had told them it was a casual get-together, but in reality, I had a different agenda. I wanted them to see the real Sarah, the version of her I had discovered over the past few weeks. As they arrived, I greeted them with a smile that masked my inner turmoil. I felt like an actor playing a role, knowing that the truth I held could bring the curtain down on Sarah's facade. As we settled into a booth, I started with small talk, keeping the mood light while I waited for everyone to arrive. I could feel the anticipation building inside me, and I knew I had to strike at the right moment. When the last friend, Michelle, finally walked in, I took a deep breath and signaled for everyone's attention. "Thanks for coming, everyone. I know this is short notice, but I wanted to talk about something important." I began, my heart racing. "It's about Sarah." A few concerned glances were exchanged, and I could see curiosity flickering in their eyes. I continued, "You all know Sarah and have been friends with her for a long time, right? Well, I have something to share that I think you deserve to know." I paused, gauging their reactions. "Sarah has been having an affair with Jenna, our house cleaner." The room fell silent. You could hear a pin drop as the words hung in the air. I watched the realization wash over their faces, and I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction mixed with regret. I detailed the evidence I had, collected the footage, the receipts, the constant lies. I could see the disbelief in their expressions, and I knew this wasn't easy for them to swallow. "Are you serious?" Michelle said, her voice tinged with shock. "That doesn't sound like her at all." "I wish it weren't true, but it is," I replied, my voice steady. "I confronted her about it and she just kept lying. I thought you all should know the truth, especially when she's been deceiving not just me but all of you." Their expressions shifted from disbelief to anger. I could see that they were grappling with their own feelings of betrayal, and I felt a pang of guilt. But I couldn't back down now. I had to see this through. As I shared more details, I noticed that Michelle's face turned red with frustration. "I can't believe she would do this. I've been friends with her for years, and she never mentioned anything about being unhappy. It's like we've all been duped." I nodded, understanding the betrayal they felt. That's why I felt it was important to say something. I wanted you all to hear it from me rather than finding out later. She needs to face the consequences of her actions. The conversation quickly shifted into a heated discussion. Some friends felt sorry for me, while others were angry at Sarah. They were all shocked, and I could sense their collective disappointment. I watched as they exchanged their own stories about Sarah, recounting moments where her behavior seemed odd or secretive. It was evident that my revelation had struck a nerve, and the supportive atmosphere began to shift into one of accountability. "We need to talk to her," Michelle finally said, determination in her voice. "She can't just get away with this. We have to hold her accountable." "What do you want to do?" one of her friends asked, clearly still processing what they had just learned. I leaned back, crossing my arms. "I think she needs to understand that her actions have consequences, not just for me but for all of us. I don't want to see her get away with this. She needs to face the truth. The group started brainstorming, and I could feel a sense of camaraderie building among them. They were rallying behind me, and I wondered if this was what I had needed all along, a support system to help me through this painful situation. As they planned their approach, I could feel a fresh sense of empowerment surging through me. I wasn't alone in this battle. That night, I went home feeling strangely invigorated. I had taken a significant step toward reclaiming my life, and I was ready for whatever came next. I knew that confronting Sarah would be inevitable, and I was both anxious and excited about the confrontation that awaited her. The following days moved quickly. Sarah's friends had decided to confront her, and I was more than ready to watch it unfold. I told them I would stay out of it, letting them approach her directly, but I could hardly contain my anticipation. In my mind, I played out scenarios of how she might react, and I found myself increasingly eager to witness her confrontational moment of truth. On a Sunday afternoon, I received a message from Michelle saying they were on their way to Sarah's house. I felt a rush of emotions, nervousness, anticipation, and a flicker of hope that this confrontation might finally bring my wife to understand the depth of her betrayal. As I waited for updates, I prepared myself for the fallout. I knew I would need to be ready for any potential denial or drama that might ensue. In the back of my mind, however, I also felt a sense of relief. I had taken a stand, and the weight of the burden I had been carrying felt a little lighter. This was my story now, and I was no longer going to allow Sarah to dictate the narrative. When Michelle finally called, I could hear the tension in her voice. "Mark, you need to come over. Now." The urgency in her words sent a shiver down my spine. "What happened?" "Just come, it's bad." I jumped in my car, racing toward our home, my mind racing with possibilities. I had no idea what I was walking into, but I needed to be there. Whatever happened next, I was ready to face it head on. As I drove to Sarah's house, my heart raced like it was in a sprint. I was filled with a cocktail of emotions, anticipation, anxiety, and an overwhelming urge for closure. I had no idea what had transpired during Sarah's confrontation with her friends, but I was prepared for anything. I knew I was stepping into the aftermath of a storm, and I was bracing myself for the chaos. When I arrived, I was greeted by the sight of Sarah packing in the living room, her face flushed and her eyes wide with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Michelle and a couple of her other friends were standing nearby, looking tense and serious. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and I could feel the energy in the room crackling like static electricity. "Mark," Michelle called out as I stepped inside. "Thank God you're here." I glanced toward Sarah, who looked like a deer caught in headlights. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could feel my pulse quicken. "Your friends confronted her about everything," Michelle explained, her voice low. "She didn't take it well." I could see Sarah's anger bubbling beneath the surface. "You had no right to tell them anything," she shouted, her voice rising. "You made me look like a fool." "Sarah, you did that all on your own," I said, keeping my tone calm despite the fire raging inside. You had an affair, you betrayed me, and you've been lying to everyone. You don't know what you're talking about," she spat, her eyes blazing. "I didn't want to hurt you, Mark. I was trying to figure things out. By sleeping with Jenna," I shot back, my anger surfacing. "That's your idea of figuring things out." The friends exchanged glances, and I could see they were both shocked and sympathetic, yet they stood firm beside me. Michelle stepped forward. "Sarah, we're not here to crucify you. We're here because we care about you and we want you to be honest. This isn't just about Mark, it's about you too. You need to face the truth." Sarah crossed her arms, attempting to regain her composure. "I didn't want to acknowledge it. I was scared, okay? Things were hard between us and I didn't know how to talk to you about it." "Scared of what?" I asked, my voice steady but the hurt clear. "Scared enough to betray me, to lie to my face." The confrontation escalated quickly, and I watched as Sarah's facade began to crack. She paced back and forth, her voice rising in pitch. "I never meant for it to happen. I felt so alone. It was easier to be with someone who didn't have expectations, someone who didn't judge me." "Easier? You think Jenna was the answer?" I challenged. "You could have talked to me, Sarah. I would have listened. I would have worked through things with you, but you chose to go behind my back." "I chose to survive," She yelled back, frustration bleeding into despair. It was like watching a dam break. All her bottled-up fears and insecurities poured out. You don't understand what I've been going through. I felt a mixture of anger and empathy. I had no doubt that our marriage had faced its challenges, but I couldn't accept her justification for what she had done. I didn't want a perfect marriage. I just wanted honesty. Instead, you chose to betray me. The room was heavy with silence as we all processed the gravity of the moment. For the first time, I could see the vulnerability beneath the anger in Sarah's eyes. She was no longer just a cheating wife. She was a woman grappling with her own demons. Sarah, it's not just about you and me anymore, I said softly, trying to connect with her. This affects our kids, our life together. You need to understand the consequences of your actions. You can't play the victim here. I know, she shouted, her voice breaking. I know that. I'm sorry, okay? I messed up. I don't know how to fix it. Her admission caught me off guard. It was raw, and part of me wanted to believe it, wanted to reach out and comfort her. But I steeled myself. This was not the time for compassion. I had to stay firm. Apologies don't change the facts, Sarah. You've hurt me deeply, and the trust we had is gone. I took a deep breath, my heart aching at the thought of our shattered family. I need time to figure this out. I don't know if we can go back to what we had. I could see the realization of what was at stake dawning on her. She sank onto the couch, covering her face with her hands as the weight of it all seemed to crash down on her. The tears streamed down her cheeks, and I could feel a mix of sorrow and anger boiling within me. Michelle stepped in, her tone softer now, as she tried to offer support. Sarah, we want to help you. We can't change what happened, but we can figure out the next steps together. It felt surreal watching Sarah break down in front of her friends, but I also saw the glimmer of hope that maybe this confrontation would help her confront her demons. Perhaps it would lead her toward the change she desperately needed. But I wasn't sure I could be part of that journey anymore. I glanced at her friends who were now rallying around her, trying to console her. I felt a pang of jealousy at how quickly they shifted their focus from me to her. I had laid my heart bare, only to witness her receive comfort when I was the one left in the cold. It was time for me to step away. I needed distance to think clearly and to gather my thoughts. I'm going to give you some space to figure this out, I said firmly. But know this, Sarah, I won't be here forever. You need to make some serious changes or this is over. With that, I turned and walked out of the house, leaving behind the chaos and heartbreak. As I drove away, I realized that I was beginning to feel a sense of clarity. I didn't want to remain in a toxic situation, and I had to prioritize my own healing and well-being. Sure, the pain was still fresh, but I was slowly regaining my strength. In the days that followed, I contemplated what my next steps should be. My friends were supportive, encouraging me to seek counseling or even consider separation. But deep down, I knew that the decision would ultimately rest with me. I needed to figure out not just what I wanted from Sarah, but what I wanted for myself. I had begun to understand that while revenge had been a motivating factor, what I truly sought was healing. I no longer wanted to be defined by betrayal. The journey ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to face it, one step at a time. I had taken back my narrative, and while I didn't know where it would lead, I was determined to find my way through the pain. The following days after that confrontation were a blur of emotional chaos. I felt like I was walking a tightrope, balancing between anger, sadness, and a flicker of hope that maybe things could work out. After leaving Sarah's house, I decided to stay with my brother for a bit. He lived just a few miles away and was supportive, offering me a place to clear my head without the constant reminder of what I had lost. I spent my days working and my evenings in deep contemplation. Each night, I replayed the events over and over in my mind, trying to make sense of everything. I was constantly oscillating between wanting to mend what was broken and the urge to cut my losses and start anew. One moment, I would think about the good times Sarah and I shared, the laughter, the love, the dreams we built together. The next moment, I'd remember her betrayal and the hurt that had seeped into every corner of my heart. I reached out to a therapist, someone who could help guide me through my feelings. During our first session, I laid everything out on the table: the affair, the confrontation, the emotional turmoil. The therapist listened intently and asked me questions that made me reflect deeply on my feelings. "What do you want, Mark?" she asked. "What does healing look like for you?" That question lingered in my mind long after I left the session. I realized I needed to dig deep and understand what I wanted for my future. Was it to rebuild my marriage with Sarah, or was it to reclaim my independence? After several sessions, I started to gain clarity. I was realizing that while I loved the idea of our life together, I wasn't sure if the reality of our marriage could ever be fixed. Sarah's choices had shattered the trust we had worked so hard to build. I began to accept that I needed to prioritize my own happiness, even if that meant letting go of the life I had imagined. Meanwhile, Sarah had been trying to reach out. At first, I ignored her calls and texts. I didn't want to get sucked back into the emotional whirlwind that came with her words, but I could see she was struggling. After a week of silence, I finally decided to respond. I sent her a simple text: "We need to talk." When we finally agreed to meet, I felt a mix of anticipation and trepidation. I chose a small cafe that had outdoor seating, a neutral ground where we could speak openly without distractions. As I walked in, I spotted Sarah sitting at a table looking both anxious and hopeful. Her eyes were puffy and she had clearly been crying. "Hey," I said, forcing a smile as I sat down across from her. "Hey," she replied, her voice shaking slightly. "Thanks for coming." "I didn't want to keep avoiding this," I said, my heart racing. "But I need to know where we stand." "I've had a lot of time to think," she began, her voice trembling. "I've realized how much I've hurt you and how badly I messed up. I can't change what I did, but I want to work on being better. I want to be the wife you deserve." A part of me wanted to believe her, but another part was still guarded. "Sarah, it's going to take a lot more than just words. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight." "I know," she said, her eyes pleading. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I've even started going to therapy. I want to understand why I made those choices and how to fix my issues." The sincerity in her voice tugged at my heart, but I couldn't ignore the fear that crept in. Could I really trust her again? Could she really change? "I appreciate that you're taking steps to change, but I need time to think about everything," I said, choosing my words carefully. "I understand. I just hope you'll give me a chance to show you," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry for everything. I never wanted to hurt you, and I hate myself for what I did." I felt the weight of her remorse, but it still didn't erase the pain I had experienced. "Sarah, I need to be honest. I'm not sure how I feel about us right now. I need space to figure things out." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I get it. I just want you to know that I love you and I want to make this work." I never meant for it to come to this. That night, I went home with a heavy heart. I felt like I was stuck on the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to jump into the unknown or to retreat back to safety. I kept replaying our conversation, wondering if there was a way back to the life we once had. But deep inside, I knew that I had to focus on what was best for me first. As the days passed, I started to make plans for my future. I realized that I could no longer keep living in the shadow of Sarah's betrayal. I began to explore new hobbies, reconnect with friends, and prioritize my mental health. I wanted to rediscover who I was outside of my role as a husband. Then one evening, as I sat at my brother's dining table, I found myself reflecting on everything I had learned throughout this ordeal. I was beginning to heal, slowly but surely. I had realized that I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for, and I was determined to take control of my narrative. I picked up my phone and began drafting a message to Sarah. I wanted to be clear about my feelings and intentions. It was time for me to lay everything out on the table once and for all. "Hey Sarah, I've been doing a lot of thinking," I wrote. "I need you to understand that I'm not ready to jump back into things just yet. I appreciate your willingness to change, but I need to focus on myself for now. Let's take some time apart to reflect on everything. I think it's the best way for both of us to figure out what we truly want." With a deep breath, I hit send. The anxiety of waiting for her response washed over me, but I knew it was the right decision. I was putting my happiness first, and that was a step toward healing. I didn't know what the future held, but I was ready to embrace it, whatever it may be. It was time to reclaim my life, to choose a path that led to my own happiness, whether that involved Sarah or not. I'd taken my first steps toward healing, and I was determined to keep moving forward. In the days that followed my decision to give Sarah space, I found a strange sense of peace settling over me. It was liberating to realize that I was taking charge of my life and prioritizing my own well-being. I began to focus on rebuilding my sense of self, something I hadn't fully realized had been lost amid the chaos of our marriage. I spent more time with my brother, catching up over dinners and laughing about old times. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in a while, and I even started exploring new hobbies. I took up painting, something I had always wanted to try. The act of creating something from scratch was therapeutic, providing me an outlet for the mix of emotions I still carried. I felt a sense of empowerment in choosing to express my feelings through art, rather than letting them consume me. Meanwhile, Sarah was reaching out more frequently. I received messages from her almost daily, each one filled with apologies and expressions of love. I read them but didn't respond right away. I knew she was genuinely remorseful, but I needed to protect my heart as I navigated this emotional landscape. About 2 weeks after our last conversation, I decided it was time to meet Sarah again. I wanted to see how she had been coping with the space I had given her, and if the time apart had offered her any clarity. We chose a small park for our meeting, somewhere open and serene, far removed from the chaos of our past. When I arrived, Sarah was already there, sitting on a bench with her head down. She looked up when she saw me, and for a brief moment, I caught a glimpse of the woman I had fallen in love with. But the weight of what had happened loomed over us like a shadow. "Hey," I said as I approached, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey," she replied, her voice soft. "Thank you for meeting me." We sat in silence for a moment, the tension palpable. I could feel her eyes on me, searching for signs of how I felt. Finally, she broke the silence. "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past weeks. Therapy has opened my eyes to so many things. I've realized how much I took for granted, how I let my insecurities dictate my actions. I know I messed up." I nodded, listening intently. "I'm glad to hear you're working on yourself, Sarah, but I also need to be honest with you. I've been thinking about us too. While part of me still loves you, I'm not sure if I can ever fully trust you again." Her face fell, and I could see the hurt in her eyes. "I understand. I can't expect you to forgive me overnight. I just hope that maybe in time we can at least try to rebuild some kind of friendship." I took a deep breath, weighing my feelings. "I think that's a reasonable step. We have a long history together, and I don't want to completely sever ties. But I need time, Sarah. I need to see that you're committed to this change." "I will be," she assured me, her voice earnest. "I will do whatever it takes to show you that I can be a better person. I won't let you down again." As we spoke, I started to feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe there was a way to move forward, but I also knew I had to protect my heart in the process. The healing would take time, and I wasn't ready to rush back into anything. "Let's take it slow," I suggested. "We can start by checking in with each other, see how we're both doing. No pressure." She nodded, a small smile breaking through the tension. "I can do that. Thank you for being willing to talk." After our meeting, I started to feel lighter. I wasn't sure if a romantic future was in store for us, but I appreciated the possibility of friendship. Over the next few weeks, we began to communicate more regularly, sharing updates about our lives and supporting each other through our respective journeys. It felt refreshing to engage in open conversations without the weight of betrayal looming overhead. I also found it crucial to prioritize my own healing. I kept attending therapy sessions, and I began to understand the importance of self-love and acceptance. I learned that I had to reclaim my identity outside of my relationship with Sarah, and that meant setting boundaries and making choices that were right for me. Gradually, I started feeling a sense of empowerment I hadn't felt in years. The betrayal that had once consumed me became a part of my past, not my identity. I took the time to rediscover my passions, spend time with my kids, and even make new friends. I was learning to embrace life again, and it felt good. Months passed, and while the wounds of the past still stung, I found myself moving forward with renewed strength and resilience. I realized that while Sarah and I had a complicated history, my focus had to be on building a future that honored my needs and desires. One evening, as I sat painting in my makeshift studio, I reflected on everything I had gone through. The pain, the betrayal, the journey toward healing, it had all shaped me into who I was becoming. I had learned that life was unpredictable, but I could navigate it on my own terms. I felt a sense of closure, not just regarding Sarah, but also regarding the life I had once envisioned. I understood that even if we didn't find our way back to each other, I could still create something beautiful from the ashes of our relationship. Ultimately, I learned that healing isn't linear, it's messy and requires patience. I had emerged stronger, more self-aware, and ready to embrace whatever the future held, whether it led me back to Sarah or down. An entirely different path, I was prepared to walk it with my head held high. I had found my voice again, and I was ready to sing my own song. This was my life to reclaim, and I was finally ready to be the author of my own story.